Is on COVID-19 related tender irregularities and corruption allegations against senior members of the governing party. We're now joined via Skype by Professor Thuli Madonsela, the Law Trust Chair in Social Justice at Stellenbosch University. Prof, good evening. Thank you so much for your time on ENCA. I imagine, just like many other South Africans, you have been shocked by the greed and corruption that have been highlighted and exposed during this devastating pandemic.
Certainly, I have been. Good evening, Clement, and good evening to the people. I have been shocked. We do expect things to go wrong in situations like this, but in a situation like this where people are desperate, you expect everyone to have compassion, especially people in government who are earning their own salaries, and you don't expect them to take food or to take things from the poor.
What does this say about those leaders, Prof, who may soon be proven to have been involved in this corruption?
Well, I'm glad that government has decided that they'll be dealt with decisively, because what it says about them is that they're not patriots. They shouldn't be in government. They're not trustworthy. But they also have no sense of occasion. That right now, we don't even have enough money for these PPEs. We don't have enough money for social and economic relief because of theft and wastage that has happened in the past. What we expect right now is for every cent to be spent prudently. Beyond theft, we just need to spend every cent that we have as prudently as possible.
Do you think there is political will to deal with this level of corruption? The president has spoken tough on graft, and so has the ANC, but talking tough is meaningless when there is no political will and action.
I honestly think there is political will. Just look at what the president has said, instantly taking action, and he has repeated that whoever is found guilty will be dealt with thoroughly. And the ANC has come together and issued a statement that this should be dealt with decisively. The Western Cape government has gone further by firstly releasing information on all of the tenders and indicating who got them, which was quite admirable because I saw in the Western Cape, if the information is correct, that they gave the tenders to people who ordinarily trade in these things.
Yeah.
Because I don't understand for the life of me, why would you give a tender to Madonsela Incorporated that doesn't ordinarily trade on PPEs? Because there's two risks there. There's a risk of non-delivery, there's a risk of overcharging, there's also a risk of standards being compromised, because this is a middle person who might buy things that are not of high quality. And if they don't deliver the right thing, how do you deal with it? Because if they don't ordinarily trade in these things, that means they're not even a member of standard setting bodies in that particular sector.
And hopefully, those companies are going to be exposed as we now see this move, as you indicated, for government and the provincial governments to actually release the details of the companies that won the tenders and those that have failed in getting the tenders. Let's talk about the Interministerial Committee that's been appointed by the President to look at this PPE tender corruption. Do we need another committee to look into this? We already have that so-called fusion center that brings together all law enforcement agencies to investigate these cases.
I think for a preliminary thing, it's a good thing that ministers have been brought together. I just hope that it's ministers who themselves are not in any way implicated in this, because, of course, if you are implicated, you are going to make sure that everything ends in a rain dance and nothing moves forward. But the idea itself of pulling together ministers is a way of acting quickly, because I don't think everything has to wait until there's prosecution. If there are very clear indications that there's been wrongdoing, people should be suspended, and the asset forfeiture unit should be empowered to freeze people's assets, so that should it be clear that people overpriced, overbilled, or false billed, we can be able to get back the money.
But are we not running the risk of having too many processes here dealing with the same thing that may really cause confusion and stall us in terms of the outcome of these many investigations?
You're absolutely right. In fact, this is one issue that came in our class a few days ago, that sometimes when there's too many hands, you end up with no hands in certain places, but also you end up with information getting lost because documents have to be given to this one, which we're supposed to go to a proper law enforcement authority. In that regard, Clement, you're raising a critical matter. I think the ministers should deal with the broad strokes around the policy processes and then leave the actual criminality to the crime combating units. The ministers, for example, can establish for us upfront, just from an administrative point of view, where processes for emergency procurement followed. I suspect they were not, because if there's an emergency procurement, it doesn't mean you have to procure from fly-by-nights. It doesn't mean you have to procure at multiple times the market value of things. And lastly, when I was public protector, we had asked Treasury in one of my remedial actions that any tender or any government contract that exceeds 10 million needed the approval of Treasury. And I would be interested in finding out if any of these tenders were approved by Treasury. And if they were not, why not? Because I do know that Treasury had implemented the remedial action, and there was a Treasury guide that required that tenders exceeding 10 million rand be approved by Treasury, which was another, safety valve, another safety valve in the system.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Prof, on what the ANC NEC has called for, this establishment of a multidisciplinary agency to deal with corruption? You know, some say this may take the form of the former Scorpions.
It does seem that we do need the Scorpions, and I agree with the ANC in that regard. Again, when I was public protector, I had a colleague, Rose, give us a presentation on what happened in America after 9/11, the theft that happened there, and it helped the fact that they had a unit such as hers that went into this thing with full powers of requesting everyone's email or sourcing people's email correspondence, cell phone correspondence, bank statements, movements, etc. Because you do need an agency that can do this. We're still going to be with COVID-19 and the aftermath of COVID-19 for a long time. So in a way, Clement, what has happened is ugly, but it's a gift, because the signs of theft or the possibility of theft have emerged early in the process. Imagine if this had happened when all of the money we...
Oh, we've lost that picture to Professor Thuli Madonsela. I was explaining the point there around this multidisciplinary agency that the ANC NEC has been speaking about, that other people say may take the form of the former Scorpions. But let's thank the former public protector, Professor Thuli Madonsela, for speaking to us about